What's up, YouTube? Tucker from Tap Forge here. This is part 2 on the Braided Mosaic series from Mareko Maumasi. Well, it's his design. I'm welding a handle to the billet here, so that way I have a way to hold it in the forge and when I'm setting the welds in my press. So this makes it a lot easier. Just quick tack weld and then weld all the way around. It's just MIG. I'll have to grind it off later, but it makes it way easier to deal with. So now we're going to throw this bitch in the forge. I keep my forge running around 2,200 degrees, and that's controlled with a PID controller.
Let's make some fucking metal!
Now I'm setting the welds. The metal has been soaking at 2,200 degrees for about 15 minutes, and that gives it a really good squishiness. So it forge welds really great together. You don't want to over forge it at this point.
That's good for our first setting the welds.
Now it's back up to forge welding temp, and I'm going to go back in and reduce the metal or forge it down a lot further. But you got to be careful that you don't get too much warp in the steel as you're doing that, because you can actually slide the previous welds and fracture them off their weld joints. So you have to be a little cautious when you're doing this. Hopefully I don't fracture the welds. So I kind of skipped a step. I didn't show you me cutting off the handle. I just cut it off, no big deal.
Well, fuck, I just cracked my screen.
Now I'm just grinding off the last bit of metal that I couldn't cut off, and I have to just beat this off so that way I can forge it back flat and square, and we'll have a good billet to work with. So I really like to weld handles onto my stuff. It makes it a lot easier to work with it and forge. So now I'm just welding a handle on back to the other side, so that way I can forge that little bend out of this billet and start forging it down to shape. It really makes it a lot easier to work with when you have a handle welded onto it. So now we're going to throw it back in the fire, get her back up to temp, and forge it down to the shape I can work with.
I already cracked my phone, so let's fucking see what happens when we get this close. I cut it! Now it's smaller. We're gonna try to form a knife. See what the fuck happens.
People always assume once you get a press and or a power hammer, you don't do much hand hammering anymore, and nothing could be further from the truth. I actually finish all my blades on the anvil with a hammer, and usually you end up doing a lot of chasing and repair work because you can move so much metal so fast with those other tools, you kind of get into the weeds. So you have to be very careful how much you move when. Now I'm squaring up the bolster, and then I'm going to use the foldering section to pull out some metal from the bolster, and then I'm going to put it on a slight bias or angle and use that to also widen the blade width So as you can see, it's coming to shape right now. Often people ask me why I need a power hammer and a press. Well, the press moves thick metal very quickly, but when the metal starts getting thinner, it moves it too slow, and so it actually steals heat from the metal and can cause cracking. So you want to use a faster, more repetitive hit like a power hammer, and that helps with the shaping of the steel.
I gotta try to pull this down. This guy right here comes towards me.
I go back to the press to start setting the tang, and this just squishes it down so I have something to hold on to, and also I'll draw that out into the tang eventually. Every blacksmith needs a post vise. You can't really hammer in a vise that's not a post vise. It doesn't take the blows very well. This has a post that goes all the way down to the ground, and so it's really well supported. Now I'm hammering in the finger choil or finger groove, whatever you want to call it, kind of just the heel of the knife to make it a little steeper, so that way it comes back and rocks to a nice angle when you're chopping veggies.
So there's half of it. The other half is in the forge. I dropped it in there. It's looking more like a knife.
Can't really make out the design on there. See a couple of lines, but we'll see what happens.
This is probably more for the video than real life forging experience. I don't always grind off my scale like this and sand down part of the raw billet, but I'm doing it now so that way I can show you an example of how this pattern's forming and what it's starting to look like. So once I have it ground all flat and pretty on both sides, I'm going to dip it in ferric chloride acid and it will etch. Oh no, no gloves, my tattoos are gonna melt away, I'm gonna die, ah! Anyway, you start to see the design right there. I think it's pretty wicked, starting to look like a braid pattern. Anyway, that's about 2.4 cubic inches right there. So that'll forge into about a 7.5 inch, 7-inch knife, integral. There's a previous one we were forging that might not make it much bigger. We'll see what happens with it. Anyway, thanks for watching and subscribe for the next one coming up soon. Peace out.